Okay, folks, so now to the conditionals. It's all well and good that I can loop through my list, but if I can't really do anything useful with it, why do I care? I care because I want to be able to separate the candies that I prefer from the candies that I don't prefer. And in this case, I'm going to make that judgment based on whether or not it's plain. So I'm going to look at the type. I want to know basically like, is there stuff in it? Because I want to go with just like the pure chocolate experience. So in order to do this, I'm going to use an if statement, right? And so basically all I'm saying, look, if this thing is true, then here's what I want you to do. Very simple. This is sort of where the concept of the Boolean comes in. It lets us say, is this true or is this false? It's the value that results when we compare two things, right? We compare two things, either they are equal or they are not equal, right? Simple, true, false, right? And so the syntax for this is actually very much as we would have it in English. So I say if, in this case, so I have item is the label that I have given to the object that is at the current item in the list that I'm looking at, right? So in the case of position 0, it's going to be crackle. At 1, it's going to be special dark, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And because it's an object, I know that I can access the properties of that object by using a dot. So I can say item dot, right? And because item in the first case, right, or in the 0th case, is going to point here, I can say, look, item dot type, and it should return crisps, right? And that's great. So I'm going to say, look, if, oops, so I'm going to say if item dot type. Now, how do I compare two things? Well, in math, we would use an equal sign. Trouble is, in programming, we're already using the equal sign for something, right? We're using it up here when we say, create a bucket, give it a label, and here's what you should put into it. We're using the equal sign there. So in order to do comparison, we have to put two equal signs next to each other. So you can think of this as like the scales of justice, right? Whatever is on the left, when there's two equal signs, is going to be compared to whatever is on the right. So what I want to know is if item type is plain, right? So if I compare whatever value is in the item type property, right, which is going to show me its value, I want to compare that with the string plain. And if it is plain, then for now, I'm just going to console log it, right? I'm just going to say, look, I only want to see the plain items. And I'm just going to get rid of this console log I. Okay? So, whereas before I was seeing every single candy, because I've now wrapped, I can only get to this console log if the item type equals plain. I should actually only see two things printed out, right? I should only see the two items in my list that have a type of plain. And looks good to me, right? So I've got that going. I know how to test for a particular value. And now the question is, what am I going to do with it? Well, I can print this out, but I haven't actually generated anything. I mean, really what I want to do is I want to be able to, I want to have two lists that I can look at afterwards, right? Because it's not a big deal if it's only, 3 or 4 items, but again, what if it's 10, 20, 100, right? We need to be able to separate these into buckets. And so to do that, I am going to create another pair of lists. And before I create those lists, I want to address this bucket idea. So basically, as we saw, the console log only happens if the item type is plain, right? So it says, look, if item type is plain, then do this. Otherwise, I'm not doing anything, right? And this is sort of the end of it. And in fact, I want to make sure that I actually label the ends of these things. So I want to sort of show, look, here is end of if statement, right? Because it's actually pretty easy to end up with a lot of curly braces. End of for loop. A lot of curly braces and like not really be sure what they're closing. So what I want to point out here is that there's kind of like, the if statement is like, it's kind of like Vegas. It's like what happens in the if statement stays in the if statement. This console log only happens if um, if item type is plain, right? That's the only way that I can end up in here and I can see that. It has to meet this condition, right, which is that the item type equals plain. Now, if I want to separate these things into two lists, right, the first thing I have to do is create the list. So this is actually the case where, we're going to create a variable. So I'm going to say fave list, fave candies, okay, and I'm going to use this shortcut, which is empty square brackets, which means an empty list, okay, and I'm going to say non-faves. Right? This is a very sophisticated sorting process, as you can see. And basically, all I'm going to do is say, look, if something is plain, I want you to add it to my faves list, my fave candies list. Otherwise, I want you to add it to my non-faves list, right? Pretty simple thing here. So, but in order to do that, I have to have a second part to my conditional statement. So the first one is easy, right? I've already done this. I can say, look, if the item type is plain, then I want to say fave candies. Okay, whoops, sorry. And now, how do I add something to a list? Well, there's a built-in command called push, right, which is going to add an item to the end of the list. And I'm going to say push item, right? Add it right to the end of that list. Now I get to the otherwise part of my conditional. So this is a great way to say, look, if it's one of my favorite candies, put it here. But I also want to be able to say, if it's not, then put it here. Okay? So basically all I'm saying is, look, if the item type is plain, right? If it evaluates to plain, if it equals plain, no, sorry, not if it equals, if it is plain, then I want you to put the item on my favorites list. Otherwise, put it on my non-faves list. Okay? And how can I tell if things have worked out the way that I want? Well, at the end, once my loop has finished going through all the items, right? After the end of my for loop, which will have gone through every item in my list, I can console log each list and just be sure that the right things are in them. Okay, so let's see how we do here. Aha, now we get the super useful listing, object, 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 object. This is just so that when you have long lists of objects, the console window doesn't fill up with a ton of stuff. First of all, I can see that this is coming from line 50, so I can double check that, yep, okay, so my favorite candies should be the one that's from line 50, my non-faves should be the one from line 51, and I can use this little arrow to actually expand it, and then it's going to give me that, and then I can just open all that up and confirm, yes, my faves are plain, and my non-faves are not plain. Okay, so we're doing so far so good. Now, this is all fantastic when I have one list of candies, right? I have one list of candies that I want to sort into faves and non-faves. But well, what if I wanted to make this into a case where what if I was getting multiple lists, right? What if I wanted to do this over and over again? Well, again, a big thing about programming is that we don't want to repeat ourselves if we don't have to, right? So I like to think of functions. So this is where we come to functions, right? So the way you can think of a function is like a recipe. It's something that you end up doing over and over and over again, or kind of any sort of process, right? It could be making coffee, for example. You have a set of instructions, you have a list of ingredients, you have a set of ingredients that you need to execute those instructions and get something useful out of it. And you just repeat those, it's a rote thing, right? So it doesn't matter what kind of coffee you have when you're making coffee. I mean, okay, maybe it does if you're really, really particular about it. For me, it doesn't matter what kind of coffee I have. I just know that I need coffee grounds and I need a filter and I need boiling water, right? That's how I make coffee. So a function is just a set of instructions that can be repeated with different, different actual instances of input, right? Different ingredients, right? Say the right format of ingredients, but sometimes different actual ingredients, like substitutions if you cook. So when we come back, I'm just going to go over how we can turn this into a function. It's really quite simple. And then we will have covered all of our grammatical structures for programming. Woohoo! Back in a moment.